Thank you all for joining me for this first time release of the Revelation, the Reformation. I'm really glad you're here, and I can only imagine the journey you've taken to intersect with this revelation being released to the world. I would love to know someday uh, what has compelled you to actually have gotten to this place. I know my journey, and I can only imagine for you the turns in the road, the uphills, the downhills, the rough spots. But you're here, and I'm here, and we're here. And this is amazing. So we get to do this together. And in this moment, I'd like to just dedicate this to nation is here to propel us. And if you can, those next steps, that next step, it's right there. And consider perhaps what has been calling you the whole way. What has been calling you the whole way. My name is Patricia Summers, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you, to be experiencing this release of this newest revelation from this enormous body of revelation, which calls itself the new message from God. This is a divine communication. It's being received by an individual by the name of Marshall Vian Summers. This process has been occurring over the last 39 years, much of it in a deep obscurity. And it officially say it began, looking back, as I did recently, to January of 1983. And having undertaken a mysterious journey of my own, I had the great good fortune of encountering Marshall in 1983, just after this process of revelation had begun. And so that's a story. And that story will probably come forward at some point in time. There's a lot to say, and there's a lot that has occurred. But I've had the privilege along the way of witnessing this process of revelation at times in different places in the world where Marshall was called to these places because this revelation was seeking to be received there, to be within proximity of the people there and the history of these places. It's very, very moving, actually. So very humbling, actually, as well. I've had the privilege and also, I guess, the forbearance to see what this has taken of Marshall to do this, to submit himself to this process. So perhaps I'll say more about that in a bit, but before we begin, I'd like to say a little bit more about the revelation itself, the new message from God. Take a moment to gather myself. These words are powerful. These are original communications from a divine source, spoken through Marshall in a state of revelation, translated into ideas and teachings by the angelic assembly. That's a lot to take in. Original communications from a divine source, spoken through Marshall Vian Summers in a state of revelation, translated into ideas and teachings by the angelic assembly. You go to newmessage.org, there is a revelation entitled The Assembly. So if you'd like to know more about this intermediary called the angelic assembly, there's more said there. So what there is then, therefore, is a divine source. The angelic assembly is an intermediary communicating to Marshall Vian Summers as an intermediary. So it's a conveyance of communication. Really remarkable. So this new message from God now, at this point in time, is over 700 revelations have been received by Marshall. Some of these revelations have resulted in whole books being given in a matter of a day or days. And some of those books have been produced, thankfully, by New Knowledge Library and the Society for the New Message, and they're available as a gift to the world. Others of these revelations have been compiled into books within volumes, and you can see all this on newmessage.org. Beautiful, accessible communication, speaking to the heart of our experience and to the mystery beyond our experience. So, the largest body of revelation, as far as we know, the New Message says of itself, it's the largest body of revelation ever to be communicated to humanity. Being found by people worldwide in over 100 countries, and you are one of them. It's through the grace and the contribution of students and readers. This revelation is being translated in greater than 48 languages. These are people who just stepped forward just because they knew it was theirs to do, translating this enormous revelation into these languages. People around the world have access. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. These revelations they guide us in both mysterious and practical ways. I don't know how to hold those two together, but it's true. It's very true, and it's for you to experience yourself. So we welcome you. And then with regard to, just before we go forward, speaking of the voice of revelation, because this is a spoken word revelation. This is spoken. You're about to hear the voice of revelation. Okay, this is speaking live. This occurs live through Marshall. This is one of the many speaking as one, using my body to communicate. So what you'll be hearing is the voice of revelation, not necessarily the voice of Marshall Vian Summers. It's just using his vocal structures. So again, consider if you want to know more about the assembly and engage in your relationship with this phenomenal body and reality called the Angelic Assembly. There's more said on newmessage.org. Marshall has very movingly said, with regard to this is a spontaneous communication. This happens when it happens for him. It can happen almost at any time. Maybe, not always, in fact, infrequently, but he may say, oh, I feel something coming about something. More often than not, it's a spontaneous communication. He says, every time I have received one of these revelations, of which there are many hundreds, it is an experience of overpowering presence and grace for me. It's really something. To witness the process is very moving. And at the same time, to see what it has taken of Marshall to receive these revelations is striking. He's usually exhausted following this experience where he's completely captivated. If not, he's often described himself as standing aside and witnessing the process as well, but undergoing it at the same time. He's often said that at the conclusion of these experiences of communication, it feels as if he's in an empty symphony hall after everyone has left. So, yeah, it's very moving. So it's taken Marshall his entire life to receive what he has so far of the new message, and he's extremely pleased that he can share this with the world, which was always the intention, to give this revelation to the world. So at this point in time, as I said, leading up to the Reformation, which was received January 18th, 2014, Marshall had 657 revelation encounters up to that point. So this man has endurance. He's fragile but strong. I'll just say that. That's kind of how he's constructed. So here we are. And with that said, I'd like to take a moment to be with Marshall, and we have an image of him to display. I'd like to definitely encourage you to take some time to consider your relationship with him as a recipient of this revelation. That's an exercise of relationship right there. And so there he is. He's with us today. And there's also an entire book of Revelation that's been given called The New Messenger. You can also find that on newmessage.org. So or who this man is doing in your lifetime, um, that resource awaits you. And those revelations are there that comprise this book called The New Messenger. And at the same time, on newmessage.org, if you navigate the website at the top tab, there's a tab that says The Messenger. There are teachings there. So you can actually begin to engage right there with Marshall and work with him. So we invite you to do that. So I'd like to take some time to prepare ourselves to listen to this revelation and to read, to both see it, to experience, to hear it. And Marshall encouraged me prior to that to consider highlighting a few things, one of which is a word. And the word is Reformation, which is the title of the revelation. Okay, it can be pronounced in different ways, Reformation, Reformation. But we'd like to display a definition of this term here. You'll hear this many times in the Revelation, of course. Reformation, improvement, betterment, correction, or reform. To change to a better state, to improve what's wrong. So to be with this word reformation or reformation, however you'd like to engage with that word. And another thing Marshall encouraged us to do is as we read and listen to this revelation, note what strikes you, what words strike you, references strike you, phrases. Just you might feel the impact of that. Because this isn't just a spoken communication. There's more going on within this spectrum of communication than we can fully account. I'd just like to and when I went back and looked through the revelation, this word must was expressed 18 times. 18 times. So I'd like to just read this here with you. Must. This from the it's a series of decisions you see that must be made in the start with you and with others like you. Therefore, do not demand or expect peace, but seek to be engaged in living the authentic life that you were sent here to live. This is the Reformation. It must happen within you and around you. So there's an example, for me at least, of a word that struck me and struck me again and again as I listened and engaged with this revelation in preparation for our time here together. So as we prepare to listen to and read and be with this spoken communication, just know that following or during, we'd love to see your friends on chat. We're on whatever platform. Feel free to communicate to you. We're here together from around the world to listen and to be with us and experience this together. And we'll spend time afterwards considering what's being said here. So thank you. And this revelation is approximately 28 minutes long. So we'll prepare now to hear. Thank you.
Clearly there is great reformation that must happen in the world. If it is to prepare for the great change that is coming, the great environmental change, the great economic and social change, and all of the hazards and opportunities that this will involve. Clearly there must be a great reformation if humanity is to avoid the risk of ongoing war and conflict over who will have access to the remaining resources in a depleted world. Clearly there is so much that must change and be renewed and redone and restored. Humanity's endless pursuit for growth and consumption must come to an end if it is to establish any real stability in a declining world. And there must be great cooperation between the nations and the peoples in order for real change to be established here. The great reformation in the world that must take place. Humanity stands at the threshold of a universe full of intelligent life. And intervention has already begun, with grave consequences. It is the greatest event in human history, but humanity is unaware and unprepared. This is the outer reformation that is of the paramount importance. It is more important than art or culture. It is more important than simple inventions for the pleasures of humanity. It is more important than anything you can think of, most assuredly. But this outer reformation must accompany an inner reformation, a change of heart, a change of focus and direction, not only for a saintly person here or there, for they will not have the strength to alter the course of humanity. It must happen in the minds and hearts of many. Not everyone, for that is not possible, but for many. That is why God has sent a new revelation into the world, so that this reformation may happen within individuals, to prepare them for a future that will be unlike the past, and so that they may be the great power of good in the world that they were meant to be, each and every one. For God works in the world through individuals, working from the inside out. This is the true evidence of the divine presence and power. For God has given you, living in separation, the freedom to choose your course and alter your world, for better or worse. God will not interfere here, but God's power and presence is available to all who earnestly seek it in a state of humility and true service. But this requires a reformation within the individual, a change of heart, a shift of emphasis. For seeking for personal fulfillment and satisfaction in a declining world is a hopeless venture at best, and a tragedy most assuredly in the end. For it will yield nothing but despair and disappointment. God is rescuing you from a hopeless pursuit and giving you the foundation for living a greater and truly fulfilling life, fulfilling to your deeper nature fulfilling to your very soul. But this life is for a greater purpose in the world. For happiness alone cannot be your goal. Not if you are honest. Not if you understand the real nature of your greater purpose here. Happiness is a byproduct, a consequence of living a true and authentic life. And a true and authentic life is based upon the greater purpose that you have been able to discover, to accept, and to follow. That is why God has put a greater intelligence within you. An intelligence we call knowledge. For you yourself cannot reform yourself. You yourself cannot even reform the world. For you do not have the power to do this. And this would only lead to confusion, frustration, and disappointment. This is why people become so angry with the world, and rebellious, and revolutionary, because they have not been able to find and follow the knowledge that God has placed within them to follow, which works at change in a different way, person to person, speaking to groups of people, nourishing a deeper conscience, supporting the emergence of knowledge in everyone around you. For it is knowledge that will give you the power, the clarity and the humility to carry out your specific role. And it will not be confused with personal ambition or personal grievance against the world. It will not be corrupted by these things, for its motive is pure. It is not guided by anger or frustration or resentment. It is not guided by the attempt to make your separate life fulfilling, for it can never really be fulfilling without this power and presence with you to guide you, to protect you, and to lead you forward. This is where the power of heaven begins to work through. But you cannot be passive here, for this will call upon you to reform your life, to question your motives, your commitments, your obligations, your goals, your grievances, and your admonition. Do not think you understand what this means, for you can only take this journey. You cannot stand at the outset and understand it, or think you know what it means, what it will do for you and others. For this is a mountain to climb. Though the philosophers may be gathered at the base of this mountain, it is only those who climb it who will understand what it really requires and means. This is no idle engagement, for it is a climb, an ascent. And on this ascent, you begin to shed those things that are unnecessary and burdensome, that do not serve your purpose now, as you take on a greater calling. The Lord of the universe has provided the ancient preparation to this world, a preparation that has been provided to countless other worlds and races before you. The races even that existed before humanity was even present in this world. It is ancient, so ancient you cannot even determine its origin. For the Lord of the universe has a plan to save all those who live in separation, living within billions of different races in a vast universe. How can any person understand this? It is foolish and arrogant to assume that you can. But the grace and the power of this is with you now. Hidden and forgotten in the ancient teachings of antiquity, except for those very few who could recognize it and receive its challenge and its great blessing. God is now calling all of humanity to prepare for the great change that has come into the world and for its encounter with intelligent life in the universe. The two greatest events in all of human history, the two most consequential events in human history, either of which has the power to destroy human civilization, each of which has the power to generate a greater commitment and a greater future for the human family. It is a series of great decisions, you see, that must be made in the minds or hearts of enough people. For the governments will not act without this great change in the people. The governments will serve themselves in the interests that support them. They will live for the moment, doing everything in an expedient manner. But there is no preparation for the future here. There is no wise counsel here. There is only shoring up the eroding structures and foundation. There is no building a new foundation. Therefore, the great Reformation must start with you and with others like you who are responding to God's new message for the world. For it alone brings the true clarity of what must be done. Speaking in simple terms, with great clarification and repetition, it brings to you and all others in all nations and tribes the great opportunity to restore the dignity and the power. It is the birthright of each person. Only the will and power of heaven can do this. It is not built upon human ingenuity or cleverness. It even goes beyond the notion of inspiration, for it is indeed the will and power of heaven, speaking now to you directly, in the voice of revelation, preparing you to reform your life so that you may be of greater service in a world whose needs are escalating with each passing day. The need is so great. The urgency is building. You can feel it. It is your restlessness. It is that which calls you to a greater service. It is your impatience with little and foolish things. For your time is precious. Your decisions are consequential. And heaven is calling upon you now to leave aside foolish little things and little resentments and vain pursuits that will only lead you astray and waste your great opportunity for being in the world at this time, under these circumstances. To be called means to be prepared. To be prepared means a greater reformation, not only in your outer life, but in your experience of your own nature and destiny. A great shift from living a life of fear and greed and ambition and constant aggravation to one of a deeper purpose, altering your perception, the way you look at all things, the way you respond to difficulties and disappointment, the way you recognize errors and utilize them for your own wisdom in preparation. This is the perfect antidote to guilt and shame and endless regret. For only with this greater sense of purpose can you use the wasted years of your life and turn them into the makings of a greater wisdom, and therefore a greater gift to others. The messenger is in the world. He who has spent 30 years receiving the largest and most complete revelation ever given to the human family. He is a humble man, a simple man, a man without pretense, a man without a lofty position in the world, a man who is strong, courageous, and ethical. But he is an older man now, and you should meet him if you can, and hear his words, for part of the revelation is within him, that only he can pronounce, that only he can express, for his life in the world is part of the revelation. Do not then rail against the world. Do not complain endlessly. Do not shake your head and feel that everything is falling apart or going into disarray. You are not sent here to condemn the world or to be its critic. You are not sent here to complain endlessly about every little thing. You whose life is working so magnificently in so many ways already. This complaining, this despair, this anguish, this anger, this resentment must be transformed into a greater sense of purpose and love for the people, courage, compassion, and patience. This is the Reformation, you see. You cannot do this to yourself, for you need the power of knowledge. It will give you the strength, the direction, and the clarity to make the many decisions you must make that will enable you to turn a real corner in your life. This is how God rescues you from an empty and hopeless existence here. This is how God finds you like a speck on the ocean and brings you to the shore where your life is really meant to be expressed. The redemption happens from the inside out. The Reformation happens from the inside out. The world is blessed as you are able to come to terms with your real nature and take stock of where you are now. For what you have to give to the world is more important than your wishes, your hopes, your prayers, your words. It is the demonstration of a greater life that is yours to claim and to prepare for. From this, the power of heaven can move through you to inspire others, to encourage others, to be an antidote and a counterpoint to the growing despair, confusion, and rage that is now emerging amongst the peoples everywhere. Fear is growing in the world. But people everywhere are sensing that the future will be grave unless great things can happen, unless humanity's course can be altered, unless there is enough people who have undergone this preparation to overcome humanity's tendencies to fight and to struggle with itself. Here you're not just seeking peace, for peace and change do not coexist at the same moment. For change is tumultuous, it is challenging, it is disturbing. It requires courage and true self-application. Peace is the result, but the process to achieve it is tumultuous. Therefore, do not demand or expect peace, but seek to be engaged in living the authentic life that you are sent here to live. This is the Reformation. It must happen within you and around you. It is not like you spend 20 years perfecting yourself and then you can do something for the world. For you do something for the world every time you recognize and follow knowledge. You strengthen the power of knowledge in the world. And your actions and your self-expression will bless and harmonize other people who find only grief, anxiety, and strain from the world around them. God is sending you up this mountain so that you may speak to the world, that you may touch the minds and hearts of others in such a way that the Reformation can begin within them. This will happen through you naturally, without you having to create a scheme or a practice or a process. For God has provided the pathway through the steps to knowledge. And the great teaching in the Reformation that is at the heart of God's new gift to humanity. Great change must be brought about through the efforts of many people. A great compassion must drive their efforts. A great purpose, a great power, a great determination, freeing them from all that held them back before, freeing them from addiction and despair, confusion and misappropriation of their life and their precious time here on earth. They have been redeemed through the Reformation. They are now working in concert with heaven. Here they are not giving their lives to God, but allowing God to guide them through the power and presence of knowledge. A power and presence that exists beyond the realm of the intellect and beyond all human understanding. Here your intellect must serve and not try to be a master, for it can never be the master. This is the Reformation that has the greatest power. Think of the Reformation that spoke to the Jesus, the Buddha, and the Muhammad, and many other great teachers, and how that has uplifted humanity, protected it from total disaster through the course of history. Though religion has been gravely misused and abused, the spirit of the Reformation has been kept alive, and that is why the human family has promise in a universe where knowledge is rare, in a universe where freedom is rare, in a universe where humanity, if it can, undergo this great preparation for the new world, has a greater gift to give to many races who live in total bondage. You know not of the importance of your life and of these times. The times are perfect to call you forth from you your greater gifts. Do not condemn them. The situation is perfect. It is why you have come. You did not come here to lie on the beach endlessly and seek pleasure and escape. You came for this greater purpose, this greater rendering of your life. You came for the Reformation. Everyone has come for the Reformation. May the power of this begin to show you that you are meant for a greater life, and that you cannot create this for yourself. It is not a product of your ingenuity or cleverness. It is something that must naturally emerge within you, and will emerge within you as you take the steps to knowledge, as you are able to see God's great gift to humanity, the great clarification that it brings, the great unity that it calls for, and the great challenges that it reveals now for the very first time.
It's wonderful to be here together to hear this and to see this and experience this. So I just posted this here in one of the chat flows. What does it mean for us that, quote, you came for this greater purpose, this greater rendering of your life? You came for the Reformation. Everyone has come for the Reformation. I mean, my God. Everyone has come for the Reformation. You came, I came. So, walk down the streets of the world in the context of our lives, the people we're looking at came here for the Reformation. And God knows this Reformation is needed now, right? I think we're all looking at this as it's being demonstrated in the condition of our world, this beautiful world, and this amazing emerging race, humanity, us. Amazing emerging world and race. We came for these times. It's amazing. I know we have to reach within ourselves to begin to comprehend on some level what I just said. So let's see what some of you are saying here. There's a conversation here about steps to knowledge, the book of inner knowing among some of you. And for those of you who do not know what steps to knowledge is a book of revelation. It's a pathway. It's a book of practice, but it's a journey. It's a sequence of 365 steps that is attempting to bring forward that greater aspect of our intelligence, which is referred to in the new message as knowledge or inner knowing, to marry the mind we think with the mind we know with. And so steps to knowledge is almost like a midwife of sorts, attempting to birth out of us this indigenous inherent intelligence. Steps to knowledge can be found on newmessage.org and elsewhere. It's an incredible gift to the world, received by Marshall Vian Summers. So thank you all for your conversation here about steps to knowledge. Oh my God. So here Ellen says, to use the wasted years of your life and turn them into the makings of a greater wisdom and therefore a greater gift to others. Message received, Ellen. process. Message received. Brain says, this revelation has redirected my mind away from complaining and given it a positive direction for a contribution for the future. It's great. It's good. In this revelation, we hear these two terms, and would like to display the first of these. It's this point of view of the outer reformation that's being called for. Clearly, there is a great reformation that must happen in the world if it is to prepare for the great change that is coming, the great environmental change, the great economic and social change, and all the hazards and opportunities that this will involve. Clearly, there must be a great reformation if humanity is to avoid the risk of ongoing war and conflict over who will have access to the remaining resources in a depleted world. Clearly, there is so much that must change and be renewed and redone and restored. Reformation is calling for outer reformation or reformation within the world around us, and for us to participate in that process as we know to, as we feel compelled to, and as we are prepared to, which is part of the reason for our preparation, is to contribute to this outer reformation. And the other perspective contributed here in this revelation, inner reformation, which I think we all know and feel so much. And we'll display this particular passage to you here. Inner reformation, I don't know if you're able to see this, but this outer reformation must accompany an inner reformation, a change of heart, a change of focus and direction. It must happen in the minds and hearts of many, not everyone, for that's not possible, but for many. For God works in the world through individuals working from the inside out. Inner reformation or reformation. It's a really interesting process to stop and more or less look at how you're naturally being compelled in life in terms of even your development or how you live, and to look for the signs of reformation. Step in and become actively engaged with some intention in our life, we do reform, and it may not be in the direction that's most advantageous. So we do with intention, but I do believe it yields. So this inner reformation is what this revelation and the source of this revelation is calling for. And it's very palpable. It's right there. It's very intimate with us in our lives. And, as said in the revelation also, there's tremendous, within the entire new message, there is an immense calling going out, a calling. And we have a passage here to reflect this calling. To be called means to be prepared. Life, but in your experience of your own nature and destiny, a great shift from living a life of fear, greed, ambition, and constant aggravation to one of deeper purpose. So this calling, feeling compelled, quietly, sometimes not so quietly. This pull, almost from childhood. You can probably look back in your life and almost identify this kind of pull that you may have been feeling. And you probably would not even be here if it weren't for this. The sense, and I know we haven't arrived necessarily, but we can give along the way. And as we see to and as we know to. So that's what the new message is calling for. And you can imagine on a scale, on a larger scale than just us in our lives, what this can yield. Amazing. It could be amazing. Not to paint a picture here that's out of keeping with reality either, because that's why there's a calling, because more of this is needed, more contribution, more presence of mind, more presence from one to another. So that's it. So let me just see here again, check to see what you all are experiencing and saying. So Victor says, benevolent and non-judgmental in character is my true God, assigned responsibility and divine life purpose, compassion in action, and being of service to others is my God-given duties. Thank you, Victor, for being able to actually express that, to live it. So that's good. It's very, I don't know how you feel, but I'm very consoled to know that there are others out there that are taking this on. I go about my daily activities, and in the way back of my mind, and sometimes not so far back, I can feel you and others out there beginning to inch your way through the morass of our own minds and emotions to the world, to a presence of mind, to being here, and to giving. So I just want you to know that contributes to my sense of personal health. Another important passage from this Rev, that speaks to decisions, the importance of our decisions. And this is important. I know I can be very challenged in decision making myself. And if ever there's a time for the need for knowledge, it's around decisions, correct? What do I really know about something? What's the best way to go? For example, this is what this revelation says. It is a series of great decisions, you see, that must be made in the minds and hearts of enough people. The need is so great, the urgency is building, you can feel it. It is your restlessness. It is that which calls you to a greater service. It is your impatience with little and foolish things, for your time is precious, your decisions are consequential, and heaven is calling upon you. Something else. God. Just reading thank you for your contributions. This is our time to be together right now. Others will find this revelation and some of our comments in the future. So know you're making a contribution even here. Oh, Elhun writes, this is another platform. What a wonderful moment to hear the voice spoken to Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad, and many other great teachers with the Messenger Marshall, and for many of us. And Douglas writes on another platform here that I'm seeing, many Christians think of the word Reformation as the exposure and dismantling a racket designed to exploit people's true religious impulses. And I do think in history, there was a Reformation that occurred in early Christianity. Reformation, reformation, recasting. It's powerful. It needs to happen. If you look at how each of us came together in our early development, some of it was very haphazard. Some of it was very native to us and our fundamental nature. And some of this occurred as a result of outside influences. And so we need, in a sense, to recast ourselves. And in the process of recasting ourselves, we will be faced with decisions along the way, as we have made them, and how they have laid the groundwork for where we are today in life. In this passage from the Revelation, knowledge must inform our decisions. This is the Reformation, you see. You cannot do this to yourself, for you need the power of knowledge. It will give you the strength, the direction, and the clarity to make the many decisions you must make. It's wonderful how intimate these revelations are, to speak of you, me, and the next and the real corner we must turn. Will we turn that corner, or will we shoot right past it? Intimate. These revelations were given with just the humble individual in mind. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's very reassuring. So we're needed. We're needed. This process that we are engaged with is important. And I know in stepping back, we can't fully even see the intention for our existence, let alone the full greater intention, even though the new message does speak to this greater intention for humanity. So it's a bit of a stretch for us to consider not just our existence, but the human race. So in this passage from the Revelation, why our Reformation is needed, God is now calling all of humanity to prepare with intelligent life in the universe, the two greatest events in all of human history, the two most consequential events in human history, either of which has the power to destroy human civilization, either of which has the power to generate a greater commitment and a greater future for the human family. And this greater future that we're in a position to contribute to is revealed further in the new message. I encourage you in your explorations to keep this in mind, to keep this larger dimension, because somehow we're attuned to that. We're calibrated, each of us in a way, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but we're calibrated to a larger reality, I think natively. And that accounts for sometimes our discomfort, because life isn't all about just us. We're connected to something bigger. And on the largest, greatest, most profound level, it's connected to God and that entire reality. It's wonderful. So let me just take one more look and see what we're saying to each other. Diane writes, for you to do something for the world every time you recognize and follow knowledge. So she's responding to that passage. And Ezekiel, for this is a mountain to climb. It only requires and means. Yeah. It's wonderful that we can be here together to take this all in. It's a stretch. It's a stretch. And so we'd love to take home with all of ourselves here now a question, me as well. And this question with regard to the Reformation in our life and my what does Reformation mean for you in your life? Given what this revelation is calling for, what does Reformation mean for you in your life? Yeah. Part of you almost has to act like a scout and go out ahead of yourself and down the road a ways to look a little bit further than the circumstances that you're living in, and then come back. And then come back with a perspective. But we can be with this question. It's good to be with questions like this. Periodically over a cup of tea under a beautiful tree, sit down and just see where you're at with this question. Given what this revelation is calling for, what does Reformation mean for you in your life, or me in my life? So wonderful. Oh, good. So wonderful. It's a sense of relief now. I feel a sense of relief around this revelation, that it's being communicated and released to the world. It's wonderful, and that you were the first to be here to hear it, to read it, to experience it. It's very good. And this revelation, the Reformation, is actually the title of a forthcoming book of Revelation in the future that the Society for the New Message is in the process of compiling. And this revelation, the Reformation, is part of this book. And it's got some very powerful revelations in it to accompany this: the age of women, restoring the world, the new message for political leaders, if you can imagine, the new message for religious leaders. Can you imagine? I wonder, oh my God, what is that going to be? What kind of message is that? Real change. The new message for the impoverished and the oppressed. Very powerful. So thank you for your support of this endeavor, of the society, and all those who are participating in terms of the students worldwide, in terms of giving this to interact with real lives, real people, our lives and others just beyond us, a step beyond us, who we may have the opportunity perhaps to share the new message with, let's say. So, and definitely consider this particular platform as a resource for you to go back and be with some of these revelations just as they were released. You can hear what was said before and after each of these, which were very recently released for the first time. Marriage and Higher Purpose, The Battleground, Raising Children, beautiful revelations, powerful revelations, now moving in the world. So they're here, and we appreciate your support in visiting this particular platform to hear these revelations. We'll be gathering again in 2 weeks' time to continue this process of bringing forward the new message from God. There are hundreds of revelations, and we need to walk down this road and carry this revelation with us on our shoulders and give this to the world, and extend this to the world, and to those who need it, to those to whom it would help, and to whatever end on a larger level, meeting the intention for which this revelation was given. So it's wonderful being here with you, and I'll take time, and I hope you will too, to read the comments and to be with what each of us have said and are communicating. Feel free to continue the conversation online, and it's wonderful to have this. Maybe we'll meet one day. Who's to say? In person, can you imagine? So in 2 weeks, we'll be gathering here at the next revelation to be released is What God Wills for You. What God will. Can you imagine? This may be a gangbuster revelation. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see. So thank you so much for being present, for taking this revelation in, to be the first to receive it. And you are helping Marshall Vian Summers pass you to take this off his shoulders and to pass it to you. And gratitude to the society and to the students around the world who've been carrying this revelation, because that has been assisting him, definitely. And I've witnessed this every day in him. So thank you. And until we meet again, hopefully it's in 2 weeks or in whatever way, on whatever platform,